Every once in a while, a kid shows up who makes the internet stop and stare. But in 2013, it wasn't just about talent, it was about shock value. Because when Julian Newman, an 11-year-old fifth grader, stepped onto a varsity high school basketball court, he didn't just look out of place, he looked like someone's little brother who snuck into the gym. At just 4'5" and weighing 70 pounds, he looked like the ball was almost too big for him. But then he started cooking people. Crossover, step back, deep three, bucket. Behind the back, left hand dime, bucket. Coast to coast, full court press breaker, bucket. This wasn't a fluke, this was domination. Julian Newman became a viral sensation overnight. ESPN was talking about him. Slam magazine called him the most marketed 12-year-old in basketball. He was being interviewed by national news stations before he even hit puberty. But behind every phenom is a backstory, and Julian started long before the cameras ever showed up. His father, Jamie Newman, was a high school basketball coach, a military man, disciplined, competitive. He ran a private Christian school called Downey Christian in Orlando, Florida, and he trained Julian like he was building a machine. From the age of 3, Julian was doing 2-a-days, shooting drills, ball handling, cone work, film study. He wasn't just playing basketball, he was living it. Jamie made a decision early on. If no one was going to give his son a shot because of his size, he'd create his own spotlight. So when Julian turned 11, Jamie, who just so happened to coach the varsity team, put him on the roster. Not as a gimmick, as the starting point guard. And Julian delivered. As a 5th grader, he averaged 12.4 points and 11 assists. By 6th grade, he was dropping 30s regularly, hitting logo threes and throwing no-look passes with confidence way beyond his years. Crowds started showing up just to see the little kid. Cameras were everywhere. The highlight tapes went viral over and over again. For many people online, this was their introduction to Julian Newman. To his fans, he was a basketball genius trapped in a small frame, a once-in-a-generation talent, a prodigy who defied physics. To his critics, he was a show, a viral marketing experiment, a walking brand. Either way, he had everyone watching. But what happens when the spotlight hits before the growth spurt, and the hype gets louder than the game? Because as Julian Newman grew older, the gap between fame and reality only widened. The viral moment wasn't a one-off, it was the beginning of an empire. Julian Newman's rise wasn't just about what he did on the court, it was about how quickly he and his family transformed hype into a media machine. His father Jamie understood the power of branding. Julian, he became the product. In an age where YouTube views meant more than scouting reports and followers meant more than rankings, the Newmans leaned all the way in. In 2015, they launched a reality show called Born Ready. Later, it evolved into Hello Newmans, produced by Ballislife. The series followed Julian and his sister Jaden, also a basketball standout, as they trained, played, and lived under the constant watch of cameras. Millions watched every episode. Viewers saw Julian go toe-to-toe with elite hoopers, trash-talking, flexing after step-backs, training like a pro. But they also saw something else: arguments with his father, pressure behind the scenes, and a kid whose life was built around being watched. He was no longer just playing basketball, he was performing it. Julian became the poster child for what modern basketball culture was becoming: flashy, bite-sized, highlight-heavy, and algorithm-friendly. And the numbers backed it up. By middle school, Julian had scored over 3,000 career points. By high school graduation, over 6,200, ranking him among the top high school scorers in American history. He averaged over 30 points per game for multiple seasons, and even hit over 1,000 career three-pointers. But as the mixtapes stacked up and social media fame exploded, a troubling question began surfacing in every basketball forum, Reddit thread, and comment section. Why isn't he being recruited? Because despite the stats, Julian had 0 NCAA Division I offers, not one. And people started looking closer at the quality of competition, at the level of defense in those viral clips, at how much of his game was style and how much was substance. What they found was hard to ignore. The spotlight that once made Julian a star was now starting to expose the cracks, and the higher the expectations rose, the more obvious it became. Julian Newman wasn't on a traditional basketball path, and maybe he never was. At first, it was awe. Then it became admiration. But by the time Julian Newman turned 16, the tone had shifted. The same internet that built him up started tearing him down. People began watching his tapes not just to cheer, but to pick them apart. His defense, non-existent. His shot selection, questionable. His playmaking, often forced, flashy, and turnover-prone. Critics noticed that while Julian was dominating the stat sheet, he was doing it against weak competition. Small private schools, low-level travel ball circuits, and self-organized events. Many of his high-scoring performances happened in gyms without shot clocks, referees letting things slide, and defenders who looked more like spectators. To the untrained eye, he looked unstoppable. To scouts and analysts, he looked uncoached. And while other viral phenoms like Zion Williamson and Mikey Williams used their fame to fuel elite college offers, Julian's recruitment remained silent. He was never ranked in the ESPN Top 100, not once. That's when the backlash went mainstream. NBA vets questioned his fundamentals. Coaches called out his lack of team play. Fans started accusing his dad of putting the brand above the boy. At the heart of it all was something no amount of handles could change. Julian Newman was 5'7". In a league obsessed with wingspan, athleticism, and switchability, he was always going to be a long shot. But there's a difference. Those guys had elite skills, and they dominated elite competition. Julian, he dominated Instagram, and even his fans started wondering, was this ever about the NBA, or was it about going viral? At that point, Julian was no longer the kid we all rooted for. He was the kid under the microscope. Every game he played, every highlight he posted, every stat line that didn't match the mixtapes, it all became fuel for a narrative that was growing louder. He's not built for the next level. But Julian wasn't giving up. He had one more play to make, one last shot to prove the doubters wrong, and it started in college. By the time he started high school, Julian Newman had racked up over 6,200 career points, more than almost anyone in American history. But even with his historic numbers, there were no Division I offers, no blue blood interest, no G League contracts, not even a serious JUCO buzz. In 2020, Julian committed to Bethesda University, a small Christian NAIA program in California. No scholarships, no March Madness dreams, no fanfare. For many, it felt like the story had ended, but Julian treated it like a new chapter. His debut game was a wake-up call. 0 points, 0 for 6 shooting, 0 impact. The viral sensation that once dropped 90 in middle school was suddenly invisible on a stage most fans had never heard of. Over the season, he averaged just 3 points per game, while shooting under 20% from the field. He wasn't the star. He wasn't even the sixth man. It wasn't just bad games. It was validation for every critic who had ever doubted him. For years, they said he wasn't built for real competition. Now the box scores seemed to prove it. But deeper than the stats, there was something harder to watch. He looked lost. Confidence, gone. Swagger, muted. The crowd, silent. Bethesda wasn't some major program. It was as close to rock bottom as you could get in college hoops. And even there, he couldn't dominate. There was no TV crew, no slam camera in the gym, no mixtape to spin the story. Just a court and the truth. Julian quietly left the program. No formal statement, no goodbye video, just silence. For the first time in his life, Julian Newman was no longer a basketball player in the public eye. No offers, no team, no plan. Just the weight of a spotlight that had finally burned out. Julian Newman didn't go pro. He didn't get drafted, he didn't sign overseas, but he didn't disappear either. Because even without a team, Julian still had a platform. Today, Julian Newman has over 1 million followers on Instagram, a loyal YouTube audience, and a brand that still draws clicks, comments, and controversy. He pivoted from being a basketball prospect to being a basketball personality. He promotes his own clothing line, occasionally plays in influencer games, and pops up in celebrity runs. But it's no longer about making the NBA. Now it's about staying relevant. In an era where content is currency, Julian is playing a new game. A game of algorithms, brand deals, and online identity. And depending on who you ask, he's either a failed prodigy living off clout or a marketing genius who flipped hype into a career. But here's the truth most people overlook. Julian Newman never asked to be the next Steph Curry. He never said he'd make the league. He was just a kid who got good at basketball really fast, and the world put a spotlight on him before he had time to grow. He became a symbol of promise, of pressure, and what happens when potential becomes content. For all the criticism about his size, defense, or decision-making, one thing is undeniable. Julian worked every day, harder than most. He trained like a pro, he handled hate like a pro, and he survived a spotlight that had crushed other kids. Because while others vanished, Julian adapted. No, he didn't make it into the NBA, but he made it through the fire, and he's still standing. Maybe not as a basketball star, but as a survivor of the internet age of hoop dreams. Julian Newman's story isn't a fairy tale. There was no Cinderella scholarship, no viral draft night, no buzzer-beater moment on national TV. But maybe that was never the point, because Julian wasn't just a kid chasing a dream. He was a mirror reflecting what happens when hype outpaces growth, when followers become expectations, and when a child's talent becomes the internet's entertainment. He was built in a gym packaged for YouTube, and pushed into a world that expected him to win before he had a chance to fail. And fail he did, at least in the eyes of those who wanted him to be more. But what if we've been looking at Julian Newman the wrong way? Not as a player who didn't make it, but as a warning sign for the next generation of hoopers. The ones going viral at 11, the ones with brand deals at 14, the ones already under pressure before they've even grown into their shoes. Julian Newman may not have reached the NBA, but he left a legacy, a complicated one, a controversial one, a real one. He made us ask the hard questions. What does success look like in the internet era? And what do we owe to the kids we make famous? He wasn't the next Steph. He was the first Julian Newman. No matter how you feel about him, that name won't be forgotten.